So you're thinking about moving to Chicagoland and you want to know, what's it like to live in the Chicago area? What's the weather that I've heard so much about? Where's a safe place to live? Where can I find the best food? Well, this video is going to answer all those questions and more right after this. Hey, welcome back to Sweet Home Chicagoland. This is the channel where we feature all things Chicago suburbs and how to buy and sell real estate right here in the greater Chicago area. My name's Grano. I'm with Keller Williams Infinity, and I am answering all your Chicago questions, the top 23 things you need to know before moving to Chicago in 2023 in this video. And this is actually part 2. So if you missed part 1, be sure to check it out. The link is in the description below. We talked about things like, what's the weather like? What kind of homes are there in Chicago? How do I get around Chicago? Do I have to drive? Is there public transportation? And in part 2, we're gonna answer so much more. So let's get into it right now. All right, so a hot topic for people moving to Chicago or moving within the Chicagoland area is safety. And I've got to tell you right off the bat, I am not an expert in safety. And safety is a relative term. So, what one person considers safe might be different from another person. And the reality is, bad things can happen anywhere. All that said, I would let you know that there is a wide variety of crime activity throughout Chicagoland. You need to look that up on your own. So I would recommend you go to things like niche.com, neighborhoodscout.com, or directly to some of these municipalities to find out what their crime rates are, what type of crime happens. But you'll be able to find pretty quickly and understand there are certain towns and certain cities that are just highly rated for their safety, and maybe others that aren't so much. So definitely do your homework on that. And the ultimate thing I would tell you is talk to locals and drive through the area. If you can visit Chicago before you move here, drive through different neighborhoods, drive through different suburbs, see how it feels. That'll probably give you a pretty good idea. Just driving around and seeing what places look like will give you a good idea of what that safety factor is going to be. All right, let's start talking about some of the things to do in Chicagoland. So you need to know that there is a wide variety of music venues all over the city of Chicago. So I think when people think about the music industry, we think about places like New York, Nashville, LA. Chicago's a huge music city as well. Chicago is a big hub for jazz and blues music. And so you're gonna find clubs and venues all over the city, but not only the city, into the suburbs as well. I mean, there are just dozens and dozens of music venues all over the suburbs. One thing that's cool to know about Chicago is that we're a big cover band city. So I've lived in other cities throughout the nation, and cover music, meaning playing other people's music, isn't always as popular. Maybe there's a lot of local bands, rock bands, folk bands that play their own music. We've got a lot of great cover bands in Chicago, and really some of the most famous. So definitely check that out. But if you're looking for original music, we've got that too in spades. And some of the biggest artists come to Chicago, of course, every year to play at our bigger venues. So if you're looking for something to do, there's live music pretty much 7 days a week within reach. All right, talking more about things to do. What about live theater? Man, Chicago is such a hub for live theater, and I think a lot of people don't know that. We think about New York, London, and some of these, places across the world, but really Chicago is a huge, huge theater hub. There are a lot of actors that move to Chicago and make a living acting in Chicago theater alone. Now, the Broadway shows and tours, of course, come to Chicago, and we've got Broadway in Chicago, which is the destination, those larger theaters, historic theaters right downtown, and that's where these Broadway tours set up shop. And because Chicago is such a big city, a lot of times they'll come and set up shop here for weeks at a time, and so you've got a lot of opportunity to come see these big shows like Lion King, Wicked, Les Miserables, all these big shows that everybody knows. Then, of course, there's all kinds of regional theater across the city. Chicago Shakespeare Theater, ballet, there's a symphony orchestra, there's all kinds of performing arts. And then even as you get into the suburbs, there's local community theaters, professional theaters that are in the suburbs. There's something, to see all the time. And whether it's comedy or drama or musicals, it's a great place to see theater. All right, if we're talking about Chicagoland and things that you need to know, then I've got to give a huge shout out to Lake Michigan. I mean, how can you not know about Lake Michigan? So I think Lake Michigan is one of those things that a lot of folks who move to Chicago don't quite understand. It's one of the largest freshwater lakes in the entire world. It actually has its own tide. I mean, so Lake Michigan is enormous. And there are actually over 26 miles of beaches along Lake Michigan in Chicago, not to mention going up into Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, etc. So there's a lot of summertime beach culture in Chicago. So it's one thing you might not expect. If you're thinking about the Midwest, a lot of people don't think about the beach. Trust me, there are some great beaches in Chicago, and you're gonna really enjoy summers here for that reason. Now also you can go out boating and things like that, and Lake Michigan is just an amazing place to spend time all year round in some form or another. All right, Lake Michigan gets its own category, but if we're talking more about things you need to know there are lots of lakes and waterways all over the Chicago area. So Lake Michigan's not the only one. Of course, right through the city, we've got the Chicago River, but there are some other great rivers and lake chains throughout the Chicago area for recreating, for kayaking, for tubing, swimming, things like that. You got to go up to the northern suburbs and check out the chain of lakes, Fox Lake and some other lakes that are all connected. There's some great boating, and there's bars up there on like islands in the middle of the lake. It's so cool. Definitely check out the DuPage River and the Fox River, which are large rivers that cut through the Chicago suburbs as well. So in addition to lakes, there's other great things to explore in nature around Chicagoland. So a lot of people think that Chicago is just this big concrete jungle. And if you're right in the middle of the city, it might feel like that. But there are some amazing parks and nature preserves and trails and things like that all around Chicago and the suburbs. So right within the city, of course, you've got the whole lakefront, which includes, Grant Park, Lincoln Park, some of these really beautiful large parks throughout the area. And there's the lakefront trail, some amazing trail for biking and running and things like that right in the city. But there's certainly when you get out of the suburbs, there's some huge forest preserves. There's the Illinois Prairie Path, just great places to do all kinds of outdoor activities, whether it be running, biking, skating, all kinds of things. You for sure got to check that out. Okay, what about education, universities, schools, things like that? Well, if you're coming to Chicago for school, then odds are you already know that. But if you're gonna be moving to Chicago and you're a young person, or maybe you've got a family or you wanna start a family, then education's probably gonna be on your mind. Well, you should know that we've got some world-class universities here in Chicago, over 60 colleges and universities within a 50-mile radius of the city. So there's no shortage of public schools, private schools, really anything that you want to learn. Chicago's a great place to do it. And when it comes to the education system, there are some of the best school districts in the country right here in the greater Chicagoland area. And you can go to different websites like niche.com, greatschools.org to find out about those different rankings. But certainly in the northern suburbs and western suburbs, we have some of the most sought after school districts. And people move here really as that's one of their main reasons, is to have their kids get a great education. All right, so back to things to do in Chicagoland. We got to give a shout out to pro sports. So pretty much everybody knows the Cubs, the White Sox, Bears, the Bulls, and the Blackhawks, all major professional sports teams right here in the Chicagoland area. But there are also other teams that you might not know about, like Chicago Fire soccer team, Chicago Sky women's basketball, and the Chicago Red Stars women's soccer, in addition to literally dozens and dozens of minor league teams of all different types of sports, college teams. I mean, so if you want to go catch like a high quality sports game, pro sports or collegiate sports, it's all around us here in Chicagoland. So if sports are your thing, it's a great place to be, especially if you or your child wants to, pursue sports. There's great places to do it here. We've got great academies for all different types of sports. Some of the biggest athletes around the world come out of Chicago. And while we're on sports, if you like to golf, man, Chicago's got some amazing destinations for golf, some of the best golf courses in the entire country right here in the Chicago area. All right, next thing you need to know is that Chicago is a city and an area with great, diverse cultural heritage. I mean, Chicago, I mentioned before, it's a city built by immigrants. So, we've got some of the largest incoming immigrant migrations in history in the late 1800s and early 1900s into Chicagoland. And so you've got this wonderful diversity. There are cultural heritage centers all around Chicago. I already mentioned the restaurants. There's street festivals and museums. So there's something, whether you want to celebrate your own personal heritage or if you just want to learn about the culture of other people, there is something to do regarding that here in Chicago. And it's one of my favorite things about Chicago. And I think it helps us really understand everyone else, understand our neighbor. And I think that's one of the things you're going to love most of all about Chicago. All All right, so one of the things you have to know when you move to Chicago is that we've got some of the best museums in the world. Not even kidding. So some of the big museums in Chicago are certainly the Art Institute of Chicago. I mean, just amazing pieces of visual art that you can take in. I mean, you could be there for days and not be able to see every piece on exhibit. Then there's the Field Museum of Natural History. I mean, one of the best collections of dinosaurs and prehistoric animals, fossils, and people come to Chicago to see things that they can't see anywhere else in the country. We've got the Museum of Science and Industry, which is just an amazing place for kids to learn and explore and understand. We've got the Adler Planetarium, just amazing places all throughout the suburbs as well. So we've got children's museums, local museums, and museums of different, specific things all around the Chicagoland region. We've got nature museums, we've got architectural museums. So if you want to learn something and you just want to broaden your horizons, Chicago is one of the best places to do it. All right, so you heard me mention nature, and that's one of the things you've got to know about Chicagoland is there's amazing ways to take in and appreciate nature right here in the big city. So we've got amazing zoos all around Chicagoland. You're probably familiar with the Lincoln Park Zoo, which is right in Chicago. It's a free zoo, and it's one of the really the most well-known zoos in the country. And then Brookfield Zoo, which is the biggest zoo in the Chicagoland area, one of the biggest in the country, and one of the oldest in the country. There's just things to do. There's thousands of animals. You can walk around for hours. There's smaller zoos around the suburbs as well. So make sure you also check out the Shed Aquarium. It's one of the oldest aquariums in the country. It's got amazing exhibits. There's always something amazing to look at there. And make sure you check out some of the nature museums and nature parks, horticulture parks we've got around the city and the suburbs as well. There's just always something to do to make it feel less like the big city and inviting nature into your life every day. All right, we're down to the last couple of things that you need to know about moving to Chicago in 2023. And this is a big one. And I kind of made a joke earlier in the video about what is Chicagoland. And so you have to understand that Chicagoland is huge. I'm not just talking about the city when I say that. So Chicagoland is kind of a nebulous term that means basically the city of Chicago and all the surrounding suburbs and surrounding areas. And sometimes when people use that term, they're even talking about southern Wisconsin and northwest Indiana. So I mean, Chicagoland is so big, it's about 75 miles north to south and roughly the same east to west. So on a busy day in traffic, it could take you upwards of 2.5 hours to drive from one end of the area to the other. So all that said, choose where you want to live wisely. Try to find out as much info as you can ahead of time before making your move. And if you have the opportunity, come here and check out different areas of interest. And you may not be able to make that drive or make that trip. So if you're trying to figure things like that out, hey, I would be happy to spend some time with you and give you my insight as a local Chicagoan and a real estate agent to be able to kind of help you understand where might you want to live based on what you like to do, based on your personality, based on, where your job's gonna be and things like that. So feel free to reach out to me, email, phone, any time of day or night. That's what I love to do, is help people understand more about Chicagoland. All right, you've made it. I can't believe you made it. Number 23, the thing you need to know about Chicagoland if you're gonna move here in 2023. And this is, I hope, a surprising and a nice surprising thing for you. And that is, Chicagoans are generally very nice. So I think sometimes when people move to a city they're not familiar with, or especially if it's a bigger city like Chicago, they might be intimidated. They might think that I'm gonna move there and I'm gonna get robbed, or I'm gonna get people being mean to me. And the reality is that the average Chicagoan is pretty friendly. Midwesterners tend to be that way. So it wouldn't be unusual for you to be out and about, in your daily life, and for a stranger to just strike up a conversation with you out of nowhere about really anything. And so I think it's good to know that if you're moving here, people are generally friendly. People generally try to, do nice things like hold doors for you. So I think you'll find Chicago to be a great place to live. And once again, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And hey, if you found this video helpful, please go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this in the future. And if you loved anything I said today, or maybe you wanted to argue about it, or maybe you have a question about it, you can go ahead and put it right in the comments below, and I would love to answer your question or get into a friendly fight right there in the comments. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.